Okay, so we've gone through lyrics writing, we've gone through chord sequences, and today I thought we'd have a look at sort of structure and arrangement. And when I was coming up for notes for this earlier, stuff that we can discuss, I started trying to work out what structure actually means and what arrangement actually means, because even though we always use them together, I class them as very different things actually. In terms of structure, I guess we mean sort of like the horizontal order of a song, so what sections there are and how many times each section plays and like what order and whatever, and that the arrangement is more about the layers of instruments. And so in my head, structure is the horizontal and arrangement is the vertical, if that makes sense. So when you like layer up songs in a like Pro Tools or Logic or whatever, you line them all up after each other. That's why I guess I think of it as vertical. It's like you're stacking them on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them are very different things. And I think a lot of the time we as musicians don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, actually. I think we have the structures that we use all the time, especially for pop songs. There's a bit of a formula for it. And the same with like a lot of folk music, like there'll be lots of verses, and there are specific structures that have just developed over time that we just use without even thinking about it. And the same with arrangement in some ways. In terms of what instruments we use, how we use them, we'll probably use very similar things each time. I know I do. So we'll chat about that a little bit. I also wanted to spend a little bit of time of everyone sort of chatting through how they got on with sort of trying to write a song in a completely different style. I don't know if I gave you this task, Emily. I don't know if I managed to tell you what we did last week or not. If not, then don't worry about it. But basically the goal was to think about how we write songs now and write something in a very different way. So this morning I tried to write a song just on piano, just piano and vocals, because I never do it because I don't think I'm good enough on piano. And if I do it, I normally would layer up the piano on Pro Tools or Logic, and then I add stuff on it. So I was just like, I'm just going to completely strip back and just sit at a piano and try and write a song. And I wrote the whole piano part, and I haven't written any lyrics or any vocals yet, because the genre is like a mix of Adele, the Beatles, and Elton John, and they're not really styles I normally sing in. So I've recorded the piano part so I don't forget it, but I haven't written any lyrics yet. So that's how I got on with mine. Anyway, did anyone else have a go at it?
Mm-hmm.
Who did you want to chat? Either Max or Summer. Chat about your experience.
I don't mind, Max. Do you want to go?
Can do.
Yeah,
so I was writing in standard tuning. That was a big challenge. I didn't like it. Don't like standard tuning. It's just really hard to break out of playing songs that I already know. It was the hardest thing I found. I can't do that with open tuning. So I don't know how to play any songs. I got about the same as you. I got a couple of lines and all the guitar parts down.
It's really interesting that you've kind of worded it really nicely. Like as a guitarist, I really relate to in standard tuning. It is really difficult not just to play chord sequences you already know.
Yeah.
And it's nice to think that different tunings is how we stop doing that. And actually, as someone that can't play piano or can't really play anything on piano, that's why maybe there's a benefit for me trying to write on it, because I don't know anything to try and imitate, although a lot of chord sequences sound very similar that I worked with earlier. I like that. I like and maybe that's it. It doesn't mean that you have to start writing in standard tuning, but it's nice to identify why we do things the way we do them. If that makes sense. Summer, what about you? How did you go on?
So I was a bit like limited with my options, which pushed me into doing something completely different. So because I didn't have my piano, which I thought I was going to get back this week, didn't happen. So I was pushed into writing on a laptop using Ableton, which was really weird, which I hadn't done that before.
Yeah.
So I just started like putting some like beats and drums now with the help of some other musical person I know. And then I just started like writing lyrics, and I know that I said that I was going to try and write some lyrics that on topics I don't normally write about, and that was the hardest thing for me, because I wasn't feeling very inspired, to be honest. And I think without feeling that inspiration, it's so hard to put something down on paper. But I literally just came up with a verse in the end, and there was put a few samples on top of the drums, and that's what I came up with in the end. But I'm glad that I pushed myself to do something like that instead of normally just using the piano or the guitar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess like the development could be that you combine the two ways that you write.
Yeah.
So the way you normally write and, you know, using samples and stuff on Ableton.
Yeah,
Ableton's very hard to use, I find, actually. It's really great, but I find it so difficult to understand.
Yeah.
I think if I could understand it, it would be incredible. But
I think it's one of those things that, like, I struggled with it for so long, and then as soon as you get your head around working in clips, not a timeline, you're like, this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Oh,
we've lost Emily.
I think she's frozen. She'll probably come back in a minute, I would guess.
Looks like she's put on the chat.
But yes, that was good. I think that's just good for my development, musically, anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you mentioned about writing lyrics to stuff you don't normally write about. That's kind of what I would like to do as well with this piano thing, is try and think about a way that I don't write lyrics and try and do it that way. And actually, I think maybe what I need to do is write the lyrics before I write the melody, because that's something I never do. I always write the melody and then just see what fits. But maybe I need to sit down with no instruments and just go, okay, let's write some lyrics, because when you do it completely isolated from the musical process, it's very different.
That is really strange, because sometimes I'll be like walking or something and I get this melody in my head with lyrics, and I think, oh wow, that's like really good. And I've got lyrics that just come to my head instantly. But then when I sit down, and I did try to do it yesterday, was to write the lyrics before any kind of instrumental, and I just couldn't do it. But so it's weird how that happens. Get those kind of two different moods.
Yeah. Hey, she's back.
Hello again.
I'm sorry that we froze. While you're here, Emily, so obviously you probably didn't get a chance to do this because I wasn't organised enough. If you were to write, so thinking about how you write music already, if you were to try and do something completely differently to how you do it at the moment, what would that look like for you, do you think?
I think that I don't know. I think that my obvious go-to is to just do samples and Pro Tools. I think if it was to be different, maybe I would just try and do it more organically. But I always find that sitting at a piano or trying to do it on guitar, it just takes me so much longer than it needs to, just because I don't know how to play. Or I know how to play, but I just don't know chord names or whatever. I know formations, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you what I was playing. sort of thing. So like trying to then write down what I've been playing was just a nightmare, because I've got to like draw out a keyboard and like write what notes I'm playing, sort of thing, rather than knowing the chord. So I don't really see anything else on like writing for me personally as worth doing much, if you know what I mean. I think being able to do it more organically would be nice, for definite. It would be so much easier as well, I think, in the long run. But for now, I think just using samples and Pro Tools and stuff is like just my go-to, because it's just so easy to do.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think like especially when we talk about sort of writing with guitar or piano, or writing sort of with just an instrument and sat writing a song, I always find it really interesting what our knowledge of music theory actually does input into it. And whilst I think it can be useful, I also think that actually, like Max was saying, playing guitar in standard tuning, you just play the stuff you know. If you know music theory, you'll play the things that you know work. And I think that's sometimes how you get caught in a trap. And if you take away that knowledge, like I don't know if you ever remember before you even knew what a chord was, when I was younger, you just mess around and you're just like, does that sound right? Like, does this sound nice? I don't know. And that can be quite exciting. Although there does have to be, I think, a real enjoyment from messing around with instruments, which can be it can be enjoyable or it can be frustrating. I think it depends.
Yeah.
Who you are.
I think it's enjoyable whilst you're doing it. And then when you're trying to note down what you've done, that's frustrating because you don't know what to write.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think I used to do similar, especially on piano, like writing what the notes of the chord, like literally what notes you're playing.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I just record the audio and hope that I remembered how to play it, but that's not always.
I film my hand sometimes. That's
oh yeah.
Can't forget that then. The audio and a picture of my hand doing what I need to do.
That's not a bad idea.
Still takes
Film in the hands. So what I'd quite like to it's more of a discussion as normal. So obviously I mentioned that if you guys want to film a performance of you singing one of your own songs and send me the video, I would put a little compilation together and I will give it to independent artists to put up on the gallery, because I think that could be quite nice. And I don't mind what it is, just be nice so that people can put musical context to the people that they may be watching. But so for now, I'd quite like to sort of do what we do every week, which is kind of discuss these specific elements of songwriting. So when we talk about structure and arrangement, and I'll probably start with us all talking about it separately. So I don't know, I'd like to know whether you've ever given much thought to the structure of your song. So when I say structure, I mean like verse, chorus, like sections of songs and length of songs, and specifically that side of it. Whether you've ever felt there are obligations for certain sections to be there, for example, which I definitely feel all the time. I remember very recently I had like a loop idea, so I just put a loop of like stuff together and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. So I sent it to Alex Van Blara and I was just like, go to town. I was like, I don't mind what you do with it, just do something. And he turned it into, it's about like 2.5 minutes. And it's like, it's a really prog rock, like progressive, emotional song that's 2 minutes, but it's like, there's no clear sections in it, and it was really interesting to sort of hear how he'd arranged it. And so I guess it made me go, I need to work out how to get out of the habit of doing certain structures. But I guess I'd quite like to know your opinions on it and whether you think it's really important to have clear structures, whether you think it's important to find new ways of structuring songs. Just any opinions you have on it. And maybe in relation to your own music or other music that you listen to. Do you think it's necessary to have almost a formula for structure in your music? Do you think that's a positive thing? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to go first?
I don't mind.
I don't mind.
No opinions.
I think it
I don't
depends on
mind
the
them.
genre, to be honest.
Say that again.
I think it depends on the genre, which I hate saying, but I think it does. Like, I think it's obviously important in like commercial music to have the whole A B C B or whatever it is. But then in stuff like prog rock or jazz music or whatever, like they just do whatever they want, really, don't they?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's important to have the same kind of structure every time. But I think if you try and diverse away from it and try new things, it sometimes might not work in your favor because it's just something that people are used to.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
I
Yeah.
agree with that. I was going to say the same thing. Like, I guess with pop music, it's got that basic structure, as Emily mentioned. And if you was to differ away from that, then the consumer might think, oh, a bit strange, and they don't like listening to that kind of thing. But on the other hand, they might think it's interesting.
Yeah.
I think that just, if you want to be commercial and sell your music, then I'm not saying stick to that structure, but I think it's easier on the ear to go verse, chorus, middle eight kind of thing.
Mm.
But yeah, I think it's quite dependable on the genre as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think where I think that especially with pop music and commercial music, the familiarity, I can never say this word, the familiarity of like the song is what makes people buy into it.
Yeah.
Like that recognizable, oh, this build is going to lead into a chorus, or oh, this is a slightly different section, this is probably the middle eight. Like there's that expectation that happens, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think it's an interesting, and like we've talked about very briefly in each week, when you're figuring out what your music is for. So if your music is to sell as much as you can, then yeah, those things are quite important to work out. Yeah, what structures are working in that genre right now, and what are people expecting? And there might be ways that you can be creative with it while still giving them what they expect. But I mean, it must be quite tricky also. Whereas if you're just making music for yourself, it's probably not as important to stick to the old radio edit, as they say. So obviously that's quite important,
Yeah.
especially in structure. And in terms of like arrangement, how do you as artists go about the arrangement of songs? So like what instruments are in it and when they come in, and how do you tackle that normally? Max, do you want to go first?
Mine's pretty much limited to instruments I can play.
Mm-hmm.
So if I play the instrument, it's probably getting featured on some of the tracks somewhere. Because it's within arm's reach in the room. So everything I've recorded in lockdown so far has had a banjo on it. My banjo's just over there. Every time I'm like, oh, banjo. The way that I sort out arrangements of my songs is by following the lyrics. Because the lyrics are such an important part of the music I'm writing.
Mm.
If I go to a quieter section and the vocals are picking up or have some stronger beat, it doesn't work as well. Whereas if I'm going into the big heartbreaky sad bit, I can bring all the instruments down, I can get rid of the happy little banjo and drop the crazy mandolin. But no way better for me, personally. But still, I think primarily by accident follows the structures that everyone else follows. So use it by accident. There's a reason that everyone does it.
Yeah.
Because it feels right. Saying that, I've got some crazy structured songs, but most of them are still verse, chorus, middle, double chorus now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's just dependent. I've got choruses. I've got songs with 3 choruses because I've got too many lyrics. And that doesn't really count as a real chorus because it's not a repeating section. But it's
tricky because then you get into the chorus. I think the choruses can still be successful though, isn't it? Because it's the melody, and if like that's still there, I think you can get away with that lyric change for sure.
The one thing that does always blow my mind, I don't know if you've noticed this, Em, while teaching, that because we've all been around music so much, you pretty much hear where the song's going to go. You know when the build-up's happening, you know when it's dropping into a section, you know when a breakdown's going to happen. You can feel it coming because we've heard so many arrangements. We know how that arrangement's hinting at what's to come. But when you're teaching someone that hasn't spent that much time around music or hasn't had a formal education in music, and it always blows me away of people going, "This is just another bit."
They don't, and you'll tell them to repeat like the verse and chorus, and they're like, "What's the chorus? What was the chorus?"
How many times? 8. No, just till it's finished. Just hear it.
Yeah, there's like once you've played it for so long, you're right. There's like you get like this natural instinct for it.
You just know where it goes.
Yeah.
It's one thing that I found recently, especially while working on some songwriting with some students, is them tackling learning songs as start to finish. Not.
Yeah.
There's 4 sections in this song. If I learn them all, I can play it in any order.
Yeah.
Here's a A4 list of chords that repeat.
Yeah.
I've written the 3 verse chords out 26 times because that's how many times it's in a verse. And follow it one by one.
Yeah. I find it really difficult because I never pay attention to how many times things happen, and then you're teaching someone and they're like, "How many times do I play this chord?" And I'm like, "Oh God, I don't know. I'm gonna have to count it out." And then you have to listen to that whole song and count it, and it's What about Summer? What about you in terms of like song arrangement? How do you?
Yeah, I say like when you're writing a song, it's kind of like you're doing it subconsciously with the structure sometimes, and it kind of just flows that way. But I'm used to writing with the piano, so I guess mine are all just kind of piano, just different chords, and like the chords just change up when it gets to the different sections. Normally how my process goes.
That's cool, and I guess that's when producers sort of come in and.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like when I took my songs to you, and we just gave them a bit more life.
More instruments. That's all it is. It's just a production arrangement normally.
Yeah.
And actually, do you know what? Like, especially with pop music as a producer, it's just about knowing what someone would do really obviously, and then trying to steer slightly away from the really obvious thing to do, and then I don't know. It's really interesting as a songwriter to produce other people's music, especially when it's just like lyrics and chords. I actually really like not having to come up with chord sequences and just get given like this sort of blank canvas of music, and then all you've got to do is add the rhythms and the structures, and that's a really interesting process to go through. And Emily, what about you in terms of arrangement? Because obviously you've started using loops and stuff a bit more, so
yeah, I just sort of It's quite tricky with loops because you're quite limited. So that's why when I use loops, I just sort of go for really, really simple ones. Because otherwise, if I go for like ones with lots of chords and stuff, then I'm already in a key, and that's all I'm limited to. Like before I send it to like you or Steve or Max or whoever, like there's not anything else I can do with it because obviously, I mean, I've got a MIDI keyboard, but again, I'm literally just guessing notes. So, but I think if I am looking for loops and if I find any that are like really simple and that, yeah, I'll just sort of go for. All I ever seem to really do is like just the classic verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, middle, chorus, chorus. To be honest, because it's just such a go-to and it's so easy to do.
Yeah.
But if I were to do anything differently, I don't know, maybe I would start with a chorus or something because I feel like that might be interesting to do one day. So I know there's a couple of songs that have done it that way, but yeah, I think that arrangements, like I don't think they ever need to be too complex in my line of field, which is just the commercial thing, because at the end of the day, it's just commercial, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there's a really interesting balance that can be had with commercial music. I think there are rules that you have to follow, but you can still be quite creative. Like you say, like starting with a chorus could be interesting. I think something I really like and I notice I do all the time, and I try and stop myself, is that I have choruses that drop rather than choruses that lift. And that's always a really interesting thing because then it does just become about the melody. But no, I think like sometimes having restrictions can make your creative flow actually better. I think sometimes having no restrictions at all, it's like I don't like, you're sort of left with endless possibilities. And so I think it's definitely interesting to think about. I think a lot of people go, oh, commercial music, oh, there's no creativity, it's all just do what people are gonna like. There's no thought process. But there is I think there is a lot of thought process that should go into it. Melodies have to be really good. I think that can be really difficult. And I think you can be creative with it. I think it's a bit of I think it's just those people that don't like pop music say that there's no real art to it, when actually, having been sat in a writing room of people trying to write pop music to sell, there is a very good art to it. That's quite difficult. For sure. So what else was I going to do? So I kind of just want to kind of like conclude the 4 weeks, even if we do continue. I'll try and come up with a bit of a different plan if we do. So just trying to like wrap up these 4 weeks, and we've gone sort of glossed over the four main points of songwriting, which is lyrics, chords, structure, and arrangement. And I think I'd love to know sort of what you've taken from all of these workshops, how you feel as an artist in terms of songwriting, whether you feel like I don't know, that you've had some new ideas, whether you haven't had any new ideas, whether you're, I don't know, just generally where you feel like you're at now. And if there's anything at all you think that might be useful to explore in more depth in the future. So just like a general conclusion for each of you for where you're at as a songwriter, if that makes sense. So I guess for me, for example, I've really enjoyed talking to other songwriters about all of these different things. And it's made me more like, because I've always I grew up with people making me feel embarrassed about liking pop music and wanting to make it sometimes, and it's really nice to feel like, do you know what? No, I feel even more assured that it's okay, and it doesn't make it any less creative, and it doesn't make it any less valid as a piece of artwork.
Mm.
So I guess that's probably what I've taken from this experience. Does anyone want to go first? What do you want me to point?
I'll go.
Summer.
I've learned quite a lot, and I've liked how you've structured it so we can give each other advice on different things and like different topics and parts of songwriting. Yeah, I think it's really pushed me to explore songwriting in a different way, which I knew kind of before doing these sessions I should really be doing, but doing this has given me the confidence as well from your guys' advice just to go for it and not to have any like restrictions, kind of just go and see what happens with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I've really enjoyed talking to everyone about this because it's given me a lot more confidence as a songwriter, I would say.
That's good. Yeah, I think it sounds really stupid, but just having conversations where you're talking as a songwriter with other people talking about being a songwriter, it does make you feel a little bit like, oh, I do belong here. That's okay.
Yeah.
Who wants to go next? Max.
I'll go.
Emily.
I think that these sessions have helped me because I think, to be honest, I've like spent a lot of time overthinking the way I write songs and like thinking to myself, I should be doing it more organically and not using samples and stuff. But then I just think to myself, well, that's just the way I do it. Like, that's the way I like to do it. And it's nice to be able to come on here and like see how other people do it themselves. And like, it's just nice to be in a creative space where you can see the thoughts and opinions of other people, you know, and not feel bad about the way that you do it, because the way you do it's just different to other people, and that's fine, you know.
Yeah.
But it's the same in some cases to other people, like so yeah, and it's nice to be able to work with people that want you to like succeed, and yeah, it's just nice overall.
Cool. Like that. Max?
I think it's nice to talk about songwriting by itself, not about songs. Like, one of the songwriting talk I ever do with anyone other than this is discussing a song, or someone's written a song and we're trying to improve the song, or I'm writing a song.
Yeah.
Some advice. It's nice to take the song out of songwriting and just talk about it as an overall thing. I don't think it gets done enough.
Yeah.
You end up obsessing over songs rather than songwriting.
No, talking about it as like a skill.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in terms of songwriters, like you said, Emily, it's about feeling like assured in our own abilities as songwriters, or I think we get that imposter syndrome where we don't feel like we should be here. And these things are always really useful to reassure ourselves that, you know, if you write a song, you're allowed to be here. And that, you know, there shouldn't be any judgment in songwriting, really. Not about when you're discussing it in this sort of manner. Because we're developing as artists and everyone is entitled to write in whatever way they choose. And you know what? Technology is available now. And like, I don't think I'd be able to write half the music that I do without technology. And I think we'd be a fool not to use it in a way. Obviously, I'm sure there are people that would disagree. But I personally think let's use these things. I think that's how you come up with new ways to write, is when new stuff becomes available.
Yeah.
no, I definitely think it's been nice to talk about it kind of in almost an academic way without actually using academics, so to speak. But like sort of taking everything apart and actually analyzing it in our own brain, even if that's to just cement what we already knew, or whether it's to actually think about other ways of doing things. I think they're both very valid things to work on as artists.